Organic macromolecules contain hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen covalently bonded, and they also contain functional groups. And we'll talk about functional groups, but it's the functional group that determines the chemistry. There are four main classes of macromolecules in our body. We have carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Luckily, three of these we're familiar with due to nutritional labeling. We're always concerned about the carbs, the fats, here's all the fats, and then of course the proteins. So we are somewhat familiar. Nucleic acids we're not concerned with nutritionally, but they are the fourth large macromolecule of life. Each macromolecule is made up of subunits called monomers. And of course, monomers join together to form polymers. This is just some terminology you have to get comfortable with. Here we have monomers. These are individual Lego building blocks, and we can put these monomers together in order to form a polymer. Poly means many anyway. So if you were to take many monomers, where mono refers to one, link them together, you get many, or the polymer. So as we go through these classes of macromolecules, we need to identify the individual monomers and the polymers within the groups. Module 1, Objective 10, be able to identify the basic structure of a carbohydrate, identify the physiological significance of monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. Carbohydrates contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. So what that means is I could take any number of carbons between 3 and 7, let's say carbon, 6 carbons, and that means that for every 1 carbon there, 2 hydrogen. You would have 12 hydrogen and then 6 oxygen. So if you have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in this 1 to 2 to 1 ratio, then you have a carbohydrate. And we can do this for any of them. C3H6O3, C7H14, O7. You could go anywhere between 3 to 7. And simple sugars have 3 to 7 carbon atoms. Some examples of simple sugars or monosaccharides are glucose, fructose, galactose. These are all simple sugars. Glucose is C6. That makes H12O6. Fructose is C5, H10O5. So as long as you have that 1 to 2 to 1 ratio for carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, then you have a carbohydrate. Disaccharides occur when two simple sugars are condensed through dehydration synthesis. If you remember when we talked about different types of chemical reactions, dehydration synthesis was one example. So when you take two monosaccharides, two simple sugars, link them together, join them together through a dehydration synthesis. Dehydration refers to the loss of water. So you lose a water molecule in the process. Then you form a disaccharide. Sucrose and maltose are examples of disaccharides. Sucrose is simple table sugar. It consists of a glucose molecule and a fructose molecule. Polysaccharides, where poly means many, refer to molecules that have many monomers or many monosaccharides, all condensed through dehydration synthesis. So here we have just a random image. This is a simple sugar right here, a monosaccharide. In fact, we have 4 of them. And when you link them all together, you form polysaccharides. And in fact, some of these molecules can be thousands and thousands of monomers long, or thousands and thousands of monosaccharides long. Glycogen is how we store sugars in our body. This is going to come up again, so please commit it to memory. It is how we store sugars in our body. It's the polysaccharide that we store. We store glycogen in our skeletal muscles, for example. Starch and cellulose, these are both polysaccharides that are produced by plants. I think folks have heard of starch before. We know that pastas and potatoes and rice, these are very starchy things. And that's because those are all plants, and that's how they store their sugars. Cellulose is another plant polysaccharide that is used to make the cell walls of plants. So every cell is surrounded by a cell wall, and collectively that is the cellulose. Cellulose is also dietary fiber, and it's fiber. We cannot digest cellulose, so we call it roughage as it passes through our digestive system and ends up in our toilets